Tom here from Lawrence Systems, and in this video, I'm joined by our sponsor, TwinGate, to talk about solving real-world challenges with Zero Trust networking. Now, this is not a product pitch. It's a conversation about what Zero Trust actually means, how it can be implemented, and the problems it solves. TwinGate sponsored this discussion, but the focus is on practical insights you can use, so let's get started. Now, in the beginning, it was interesting how remote access worked. We started with just on-prem computers, and eventually we needed to start connecting them, and we needed to start getting people remotely access to them. And so let's start there as part of the topic. The dial-up days, if you will. I ran a remote access server, and it was, like 4 phone lines coming in. That's how, so we could have up to 4 people remote accessing it. The early days were primitive, but worked. They were kind of riffing off the BBS stuff in a way.
Tom, it's funny. I saw an AI generated video just the other day where it was talking about how Gen X thinks the peak of technology was the 56K modem, and I thought, hey, we've been working on this stuff for a while. Without giving the history lesson, those were moments that made me see what could be. My spouse, who was also in tech at the time, we were dialing up so we could work late, and at that time, I managed the extranet and remote access at the first startup, and it was clunky to say the least. But we saw the power, and that was really the step into networking at all. I kind of tripped and fell into networking because I saw, and this is going to sound rough in the days of work life balance, but I just thought I saw how we could extend the day. You could get home and finish up some work and just really get ahead as an individual or as a company by extending the day.
I think there's a freeing aspect of it as well, because I could say, all right, I'm going to leave here at noon. And at the time of the dial up days, I had just had my first child, but I was able to leave, but still log in and monitor things. I did some database administration on RS-6000 and dialing into that and using was it Weiss emulation, I believe, was the emulation a lot of the stuff used. And so it worked good. It was all text driven, but I was able to get the things done, make database changes that need to be made. And there's a freeing aspect of it as well. So I know some people, they perceive it as the extended workday, but it was also, I don't have to be here to push these changes, especially when we would have so many records and computers not being as fast. This would take a long time. I needed to monitor the activity of it, but who wants to sit at work for 12 hours doing a database migration?
That's actually a great way to look at it, and I think that almost hints at what happened next. In that, when we needed to secure remote access, it was really just about web and email, and it was ad hoc access, and then it pivoted to mobile access, where there was a need to accommodate something after the BlackBerry. We'll skip a bunch of history to not get into that, and that was conjoined with Wi-Fi arriving in the enterprise, and so then the same controls we needed on remote access emerge in the enterprise. And, there's a storied and painful history around identity-based networking and admission control that came together as zero trust. And I think there's been so much hype about zero trust and a panacea that comes in versus it being an outcome. And really, I think that's been the last phase, is getting zero trust to be an outcome that we're chasing versus some magic thing that just happens.
The older version of me, like, I cringe looking back at the younger version of me of how insecure the things we did were. We just telnet everywhere, and nothing was encrypted. And I think there's going to be a point in the future where we see ZTNA go, remember when that was hard? And I think we're at that inflection point where it's moving to be a lot easier. We're seeing every day in the news the traditional old school VPNs. They're such the SSL VPN. Let's just make a web portal because that would be convenient. And it was for the time. It solved the problem of the era, but I can't spend 5 minutes in the news in the tech world to not go, oh, look, insert name of large company that had another breach directly related to their SSL VPN, because no one's refactored that code. It's an old way to solve the problem.
I remain very sort of proud and grateful that I was able to work on that stuff now 20 years ago. And you just nailed it. The lack of refactoring those products going into traditional companies or companies where they have been, frankly, in my opinion, somewhat neglected. Um, while this need was growing and growing and growing, and that just being about some cloud version of VPN being the replacement versus taking zero trust elsewhere. ZTNA is, it's really worked for as microsegmentation in data centers, but increasingly we don't build our own data centers except the very largest of us. So as companies, and so I think the taking zero trust beyond the network, taking the N out of ZTNA is the way I've been describing it, so we can achieve that outcome in the way we work now. And it's not an SSL VPN whose job was really extend the day, enable the first generation of mobile work when Wi-Fi was just in cafes or at home and not in the enterprise yet. And I think now we all work in a much different way. We work everywhere. We need to do our best work from anywhere, whether it's a cafe or on the road or in a home office like these. We need to be able to do our best work, and that means the security controls need to change. And I think a modern, simple approach to zero trust involves taking the network out of zero trust.
I think there's part of it is a long history of the way the language is around it and the way a lot of people have common understanding. Because any movie we watch, when they hack, what do? We got past the firewall. We're inside the network. And those were definitely valid. I actually had just reread The Cuckoo's Egg, which is a great book that gives you a great history of all that and thinking about how things were. I highly recommend anyone in security read that book, even though it's from the 80s. It's absolutely worth the read. But that is not where we're at today, where, as you said, zero trust. And let's bring back to what a good definition that is. And it's your position in a network does not change your privilege. It's all about your identity. And that is what's really, we need to identify that this user has access to these resources. That's what we're talking about with zero trust, is that we're going to say, we've validated Tom is an employee for this company, and these are the things he's allowed to access, no more, no less, get his job done. And that is a way better security posture as opposed to back in my dial-up days when anyone could have really, if they wanted to, pivoted anywhere they wanted in the network because we didn't have such fancy controls and firewalls. You got on the network, you can do whatever you want. I trust you. You dialed in. There's a user and password. You're good.
I mean, this it's so true that the thinking was rooted in firewalls, and in the early days of admission control and such, folks called it a departmental firewall until they said, "Oh wait, let's do this on a switchboard." And these physical elements are irrelevant to policy at this point. I think that's the thing that really needs to be recognized. That the network left the building, we've left the building, and so the policy needs to follow the transaction around, and not just in a metaphorical sense. Like that's the actual solution, to have a policy that's defined in terms of the user and the resources, and it's carried with the transaction. In the past, there was talk about some kind of pixie dust in the packets that would make this work. It was all networking oriented. By applying sort of a cloud native era thinking to it, we can achieve that end, but without being tied to like the physical transport of something over Ethernet that's talking TCP or UDP. Like we can just break that out entirely and have the transaction associated with entitlement that are done in a much different way than thinking about it from the network first. Of course, we have to secure network infrastructure. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those transactions involve a user and a resource, and so their entitlements need to flow with them. And with a simple modern approach, that's the outcome we affect.
Go over some of the technical of this type of VPN. What makes it so different than some of the traditional thoughts we have on IPsec or OpenVPN?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it I think, has to do with your surface area of exposure, right? You went from having an office you have to protect, and maybe a user has a single device that's company issued, and you have to protect that as well. But there's nothing else, there's no other network that you have to protect. And so login password might work, opening a port might work for a time, and you might not get attacked on that open port you have. But eventually it becomes a problem as that surface bubble of exposure expands. People connect from cafes, from home, from their friend's network, from the airport, from a hotel, and they connect from their personal devices as well. What you were saying about identity is a good point. It goes beyond even the identity of the user. It goes also with all of the parameters, all of the context by which a user is connecting to what they're rightfully allowed to access. It's the user, but it's like, what should be true of the device they're connecting from? Should that device be known in advance? Should it connect from a particular location? Should it run certain things? Should you make sure that the device or the identity of the person isn't magically tied to 10 different public IPs in less than 24 hours? Like, I've seen that with customers at Twingate, right? Where we extract data from their connectivity and we notice some really abnormal usage patterns. And we have to look and take into account all of those factors when considering the right security model for a company.
Yeah, the posture of the system. Does it have, as an IT admin, I would have certain tools I may want loaded on there. And did someone disable those tools? Got to be very suspicious. Or if they're just not there, someone has somehow figured out a way to clone the identity and like they're coming from a system that I don't want attached to my network. These are all those extra factors. And also from a technical standpoint, there is the network connectivity that the device needs and many devices need just to get out to the internet and get things online. The way this solution is being solved differently with tools like Twingate is you're creating a specialized network that has validated all these other settings and parameters, then allows access to it.
Tom, I think this is a really important point. Sort of jumping in, the the idea that it's another VPN or a new type of VPN, I kind of disagree with. If I was gonna term Twingate in the context of like kind of the way we used to think about it, okay, it could be thought of as a proxy chain or as a barbell proxy with a gate that validates a transaction on the ingress to what you described as this other kind of a network, and then before it goes out to a resource. So I really think about it more as a barbell proxy with quick transport in the middle. And there's a word we've used for a long time: overlay networks. Often overlay networks had addressing associated with them. And the thing that's very different about Twingate is all of that addressing, all of those network semantics are a real barrier to folks who are coming at this from a cloud standpoint or a kind of host standpoint or pure software. All those networking semantics, like they just don't matter if you have Twingate, a proxy on one side, a proxy on the other, a policy engine in the cloud, a fleet of relays to make sure that if the peer-to-peer connection isn't there, we can get it there just as fast and sometimes better. So that approach is a combination of a lot of things that have labels in networking, software-defined networking, a software WAN, like all these things we've talked about. What we've done that's different is we've taken all the complexity and the semantics of networking out of it, and it's just the user and their resources and the policy that you want to apply.
I think that's a really good point because I certainly don't want to bring anyone to the impression that here's another network for you to manage because you don't have enough to do. This is a layer that you don't have to. Twingate takes care of that. You have the technical details. It's not magic, but it's not something that's going to burden you. And I think that is a really, really good point to make because I think that's where we're going to add another tool is not something the IT department wants to say. Sure, we're going to get to zero trust. Oh, we have to add more tools. We have to manage another network. That doesn't sound fun at all. So yeah, your points are very well taken there.
I feel like a lot of what we've built with Zero Trust is we're recovering the same security controls we used to have when VPNs just were barely a thing. You'd have to go to an office, right? So you'd have to check into the office. You'd have to show your face. People would verify your identity. It's got nothing to do with your job, but it's just part of the physical mechanics around you doing your job. Then you plug in your computer to the network. The computer's company issued. Maybe it's tied to Active Directory, so you can't just bring your computer from home and connect it, and then you're within a trusted network, but there's firewall rules as well. None of that is a preoccupation of the user, and it's kind of built into the whole system, right? Outside of networking, it feels like Zero Trust just brings back those exact same controls that used to be outside of networking, but now makes them available in a super distributed world, completely abstracted from location and other types of constraints we all used to be under.
And I think it fulfills the empty promise of those controls that was made over 10 years ago. That promise was made and really only ever succeeded in the data center. There are, it's controversial maybe to say that cloud VPNs haven't succeeded because there's some biggish companies that focus on that for both a private access and an internet security kind of use case. But at the end of the day, if you just look at the news, the traditional approach with infrastructure, like 8 of the top 10 breaches are rooted in those edge systems. And it's just because the risk profile has changed so much. It was, I wasn't even, maybe 10, 12 years ago where we were saying everyone's going to get an IPv6 address. We're going to have this giant network where anything can connect to anything. Looking back, like, what a crazy idea that we weren't going to like limit that attack surface, right? But when Wi-Fi was coming out, when carriers were adding IPv6 everywhere, that was some of the thinking. All that needed to be pulled back. That infrastructure needs to be pulled back, and we also can't rely on individual parties who put every service into a cloud and then just move the exposure. So I think what's different about TwinGate is we're really focused on making people to work from anywhere and do their best work just like they're at home or in an office, even if they're in a cafe. Um, and then every single transaction has the entitlements validated, not just that there is some kind of token carried along, but actually looked at and validated in the client before the request ever goes out. And then again within the server, all at the direction of our cloud controller and in collaboration with the fleet of relays that's global that makes sure the connectivity is there. So we focus on making this really complex problem really simple, and we're paying attention to those entitlements every time there's a transaction in the client and when there's a transaction in the a transaction directed to the resource. And Brent hit on something very important, that's more than identity. There's a whole host of elements that can be used in that policy, and we make that really easy to deploy and operate because it's just too much work to do it the old way.
I think there's a point here, real quick, that not every time something becomes easier to do doesn't make it less secure. This is a lot of well-engineered, well-thought-out plans to go, hey, we can actually make this easier for the user and it's more secure. That's a huge selling point on this.
It's so easy that we just take it on that anyone can go get started in a home lab environment. It's so easy to deploy that you just got to go to twingate.com and sign up. And that process, I get lots of emails every week because we interact with everyone who starts using the product. Whole team collaborates on this because it's a high volume. So many people say it was just so easy to get set up. I can't believe that zero trust access could be this easy, or I can't believe that access to my home lab could be this easy. And now and then folks say, you know what, this is so easy that I think I can use this in my work environment. And that's really the key, is not making it complex to achieve security, but making it so easy that that goal of zero trust increasingly just happens. It's become part of how we work.
I agree. I wanted to go back to that actually because it's a huge value proposition. I think I don't know about you guys, but I remember maybe like 10 plus years ago selling software that really wasn't intuitive, stuff that's very powerful, but that's also very technical and requires in some cases a week, 2 weeks, or more of like proper product training before you can master it. And I think people were sort of proud of mastering those advanced technologies at the time because what if you had to spend weeks learning something? You're going to have to convince yourself it's the best thing since sliced bread, right? It's kind of a sunk cost at this point. But now, these days, people are immersed into so many different areas. There's networking, but networking on prem is going to be different from networking in GCP, AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean. And then it's just not just networking. There's other technologies that are adjacent to that that you also and you end up having to master as well. And so this like intuitive ease of use that TwinGate has, it's a huge driver for people that want better security, but don't want it at the expense of having to learn something for weeks on end. And then you don't use it. You set up your security perimeter. You're seeing some benefits from it, but then you don't fine tune it for 4 weeks. With TwinGate, you don't actually have to rememorize everything you've learned, right? It's intuitive enough that you can go back to it and it kind of clicks. Oh, right, that's why I configured it that way. It's visual, it's easy, yet it's powerful. I do think there's a lot of value for admins that are really strapped for resources to go towards a solution that provides a lot of security benefits that are modern, but also that really focuses on the experience of the administrator and of the end users as well. Fewer tickets, right? That's important.
And I think there's another added benefit here we'll add towards the end of this before we wrap it up, in that you're gluing a lot of different disconnected systems together, because nothing is just in the cloud or just on-prem, and it's not all in one cloud. Maybe we have something we host in one place and something hosted in another. As enterprise is grow, there's sprawl. Putting it all in one place for the user, we've added ease of use and also the ability to move something. You put that connector on that server, we've granted access, but we have to spin up a new one. We've moved a server. We just change around where that endpoint is in the TwinGate network, and the users still see, I go here to access this thing. It helps a seamlessness that I think actually, once again, on the sysadmin side, isn't creating a really heavy burden, but creating just another simple connectivity. You draw the map in there. We're going to move you to move the other server. The users are unaware. We don't have to retrain anyone. All the same policies apply. We just had to point them at the new thing we installed.
You hit on something so important here, and where we really have been headed this year, which is bringing automation to all of that management. So bringing smart automation, especially to cloud builders who are working in a multi-cloud environment, um, so that they don't even have to think about it. They don't even have to think about it when something changes. That's a key. Taking automation to the problem of all the manual tasks that need to happen on network. This has been emerging in the last 5, 7, 8 years. Again, first in data center networking, we have brought that to enterprise zero trust, and it works even for folks who are small teams who don't have someone to babysit their infrastructure or babysit their cloud VPN or edit these ACLs that have to go to every client or whatever technical task is going to take their time. We've driven towards automation in a big way, and we're seeing that enable small businesses to take on zero trust in a way they couldn't before, and folks who are building systems that are delivering AI services, enabling them to scale out in a way that they just couldn't before, and they couldn't chase zero trust as quickly or as effectively before with the traditional kind of slice up the infrastructure approach.
No, those are all excellent points. Quit solving problems the old way. There's a new way to do it. And it's, yeah. And not opening ports is definitely, I'm excited to a day when some things become a little bit more invisible for corporate places, because I mean, there's plenty of tech news to read about this, but it feels like we spend too much time on it because it's too top of mind, too many companies getting hacked. And I look forward to a day when companies go, okay, we need to adopt this, because I'm kind of tired of I got a few black eyes and a few punches from this, and it's not fun.
Yeah, that's one reason I'm really excited about TwinGate, because you know, I think all of us who've been in security for a while are ultimately mission driven, and the explosion of attack surface, people getting popped on that perimeter, identity being a big problem, identities being lifted, and then as Bren was describing, not being able to correlate across that access. It's a real problem, and when the providers of access are now becoming the problem that causes these things to happen, something has to change. And I think that's the mission TwinGate is on. It is hard to do systems like this that are simple and secure. It takes focus. It takes the determination of a startup team to go get it done. And I think we're demonstrating that that's happening in the industry today, and we can do it. But it's a journey. It ebbs and flows, and this needs some attention given the history of the last 2, 3 years.
I started on a home lab, right? Actually, prior to TwinGate, I didn't even realize you had solutions that didn't require to open a port in your firewall. And I used to actually, look at my logs on a weekly basis and look at how many different scans, attempts at brute forcing my port were on a given day. It's between 15 and 60 times a day. Like, no one cares about my home lab at all. There's nothing interesting in it, but it's an open port, so it can be scanned, so it can be brute forced. And I started with TwinGate, realizing, like, having this brand new world open up to me where I could just remove the front door to my house entirely. And so there's nothing to brute force. That was really, really compelling for me, because it's, again, within 15 minutes, I actually installed TwinGate in my home lab over VPN while I was in Mexico City, right before I got in touch with TwinGate, because I was so impressed with the technology. And that was news to me, right? And it was just wonderful value to get at the price of really no time spent learning networking in detail back then. Anyone can try it. Anyone should try it.
Easy to get started. Poke at it, play with it. I always encourage people, learn a new thing, and you might find you like it more than you thought. So thanks for joining me, guys. This was great. Hopefully this helps people get further along. And the zero trust, man, it's easier than you think. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's less secure. It's kind of the opposite. This is the new ways to think about things is what makes it better.
Tom, thanks so much for having us. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Tom, I just wanted to add something. I don't know if you want to use that at some point, but we support community users also, by the way. We have a subreddit. Anyone's welcome to join our subreddit and ask questions to us. You will see me there on a daily basis answering all and every question we get. Again, part of our success and part of the focus we have on ease of use is comes from the community, right? It comes from interacting with users, home lab users. It's a huge part of our business, so we're paying close attention. So if you give us a try, come and ask your questions on our subreddit. You'll see me there all the time.
Absolutely. That is awesome. And thank you.